Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webcast today on the 2017 survey, Mainframe FTP Security and Compliance. My name is Yvonne Wheaton. I'll be your moderator today. I represent Software Diversified Services. Here's our agenda for the next 50 minutes or so. I'll share a bit about SDS, or Software Diversified Services, and provide a brief introduction. I'm pleased to introduce Bob Thomas from Enterprise Systems Media, who will present the latest survey results, 2017 Security and Compliance Survey. Bob Thomas is the CEO and founder of Enterprise Systems Media and the publisher of the Enterprise Executive and Enterprise Tech Journal magazines. For over 30 years, Enterprise Systems Media, Inc. has been serving the information needs of the IT professionals at Fortune 500 size enterprises throughout the world. Colin Vanderross from SDS will present what is SFTP and provide an overview of VFTP and SSH. Colin will touch on why folks are having to secure their FTPs in light of recent hackings and also the compliance that goes with it. He'll then demo Vital Signs FTP-SSH Collaboration software. Colin is a senior systems engineer here at SDS. He has over 25 years' experience as a customer at a large bank as their network systems programmer responsible for network transfer and security file solutions. He's been at SDS for over 8 years now, focused on network software solutions and security solutions. Following Colin, we'll have our Q&A session. So a little bit about SDS. Software Diversified Services, or SDS, a global leader in mainframe software, has been named to the Cybersecurity 500 list of the world's hottest and most innovative cybersecurity companies for second quarter of 2017. Founded in 1982, SDS is a Minnesota-based company that has a 35-year history of offering security, encryption, data compression, and network monitoring customer-centric IT infrastructure solutions. We offer over 25 ZOS, MVS, VSE, and VM mainframe and distributed systems business software solutions. Rated number 1 by the prestigious IBEX Bulletin, SDS is noted for its award-winning technical support, industry-leading software and documentation. SDS has licensed over 1,000 enterprise clients worldwide, including many Global 500 companies. This includes banks, finance, insurance, retail, as well as local, state, and national government. SDS is an IBM partner in development and an advanced member of IBM Partner World. You can stay connected with us for the latest news and technical information on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and our blog. I'm sure you're all familiar with DLP, or Data Loss Prevention Strategy, that includes identifying data ownership to support business regulatory compliance and protect data integrity. This includes data at rest or in motion through your network. Ponemon 2017 study, the more records lost, the higher the cost of the breach. In this year's study, the average total cost ranged from $1.9 million for incidents with less than 10,000 compromised records to $6.3 million for incidents with more than 50,000 compromised records. They also point out that incident response teams and extensive use of encryption reduce cost. The extensive use of encryption reduced cost by $16 per capita, with an adjusted average of $125 per record. Hackers and criminal insiders cause the most data breaches. We've heard this a few times. Evaluating risk across the enterprise and tracking compliance with governance requirements can improve an organization's ability to detect and escalate a data breach. So today we ask some questions. Can you identify all your FTP traffic? Do you have the strongest level of encryption across multi-platform environments? Do you require encryption for data at rest and data in transit? And are you in compliance with HIPAA, PCI, SOX, GLBA regulations, depending on your business? Just some of the things to think about during Bob's 2017 Security and Compliance Survey presentation. He has some very interesting results. It is my pleasure to hand the presentation over to Bob Thomas from eSystems Magazine. Bob?
Welcome, and thank you for joining us today. We recently conducted the 2017 Security and Compliance Survey to gain insight into how readers are securing against data loss and complying with their organization's data loss prevention policies. I would like to present some of the findings from this survey to you now. We wanted to learn if our readers can measure and or identify all of the FTP traffic moving in and out of their ZOS mainframes. As you can see, 35% responded yes, 36% responded no, and 29% responded with don't know. We then asked readers if their shop had implemented secure alternatives to FTP on ZOS. Here, 37% responded yes, 20% responded no, and 43% responded with don't know. Next, we asked readers to rank their top 5 requirements from a list of items we provided when selecting technology for secure file transfers. Encryption was ranked highest, followed by automation, visibility and monitoring of mainframe file transfers, alerts sent by email and or system console messages, and real-time reporting capabilities. When we asked if there was an outstanding open audit item based on a clear text file transfers or FTP vulnerabilities, a whopping 73% of respondents didn't know. Obviously, there's room for some improvement in this area. When we asked if FTP was a concern to organizations as it relates to data loss protection, 10% answered no, 50% answered don't know, and 40% answered yes. As you can see from the response to the question, what areas are you most concerned about when it comes to including FTP in your mainframe data loss protection plan? The greatest concern is with alerts and incident detection, followed by both data leakage/exfiltration and compliance, which are followed by FTP batch monitoring and encryption. Clearly, there is a concern when it comes to not only including FTP in your mainframe data loss protection plan, but also in having the tools necessary to manage and monitor the use of FTP. Now that concludes my portion of this webinar. Thank you so much for your attention.
Hello everyone and welcome. Thank you for taking time out to view our webinar today. Also a big thank you to Bob Thomas and to Yvonne for the information they presented during today's presentation. So here's the agenda for my piece of the presentation. I plan to give you a little refresher on FTP and state some of the pros and cons of FTP. Also, we will be discussing SFTP in discussions with our customers. A lot of folks are migrating from the unsecured FTPs to SFTP. Obviously, there's a lot of reasons why customers are doing that. Firstly, it's not the most elegant solution to run your FTPs unsecure because you know some of the risks and some of the disadvantages of that. So we'll talk about the pros and cons of using SFTP. Then today's presentation is about VFTP and SSH, which is a combined solution which allows customers to migrate their FTPs to SFTP with minimal changes or without making any JCL changes to their FTP batch jobs. So I'm going to talk about the pros and cons of using the FTP to SFTP solution, then a quick overview of VFTP and SSH, and in my demonstration I'm going to show you how existing batch jobs can be used and without making any JCL changes. As I mentioned previously, you can route these batch jobs to a proxy and the proxy can convert those FTP commands to SFTP. Okay, let's talk about good old FTP. One of the biggest advantages to FTP is that it's already available in so many different operating systems. You name it, ZOS, Windows, Unix, Linux, usually comes with FTP all ready to go. The client side is nearly always available for use and the server side is usually pre-installed, and with just a little bit of configuration and customization you can have it up and ready and available for use. FTP has also been around for a very long time. Since it's been around for such a long time and so readily available, I'm sure everyone on today's webcast has probably had some exposure to FTP. Another nice thing about FTP, it's pretty simple to use. It follows some common prototypes that everyone is familiar with. It also has a nice basic syntax for the fundamentals. In addition, it's been the de facto standard for such a long time, and so widely exploited in customer environments. You probably find that in most customer sites, it is firmly entrenched. You probably find it's being used in daily processes to transfer files, probably within the intranet, and not so much anymore these days when you have files going outside of the firewall. FTP usually comes with some appropriate extensions to make it work well on the platform that it's been delivered with. For example, the ZOS FTP server and the client handle ZOS datasets seamlessly, so you can store those depending on where you want to store them, either on a ZFS or in a ZOS dataset. It works pretty well. The ASCII to EBCDIC conversion is supported. If you need to send from the mainframe to a Windows platform, for example, you can control what format the data is being sent out in. And even JS support is available for the submission of jobs and extraction of reports. So what are the cons of using FTP? And again, we know one of the major flaws of FTP is that it doesn't handle privacy and security very well. FTP is a clear text protocol, and eavesdroppers on the line can see user IDs and passwords, and also, the content of the data file. In a closed, secure environment, that can save a lot of hassles, but that type of inherent guarantee is more the exception than the rule in today's networking environments. What are some of the other limitations of using native FTP? FTP did not make any concessions for improved network performance. Compression was not native to the FTP protocol. We have seen there in some implementations of it, there's a Mode Z extension available, but don't always expect that to be available. FTP also does not provide any application level checksum to verify the integrity of the data. It relied on the TCP checksum, which provided some minimal checking, but can also be easily fooled. When would you consider using FTP? FTP can still be useful when privacy and integrity are less important than easy access. For example, if the data that you're sending is public knowledge and there's room for inaccuracy, then FTP might be a good solution to consider. Also, since FTP is familiar and already available in most cases, it can be used effectively. Although, if you consider, the intranet is no longer considered such a trusted network, you review the insider threats are the leading cause of the data breach, and this is a statement that comes from the Forrester Research Group. That's certainly something you can look into. But even although the intranet was considered a trusted network a while ago, we know that most of these threats, the insider threats, are the leading cause of these data breaches. Let's move along. Let's talk about some of the advantages and disadvantages of using SFTP. So it is a point-to-point encryption. Let's be clear on SFTP. It is not the encryption engine. It is the subsystem of the SSH server. So it's the SSH component that is responsible for encryption. SSH can encrypt lots of kinds of traffic, including telnet, file transfer, and just about any kind of TCP traffic you want. SFTP is simply the add-on that makes file transfers more convenient to run through the SSH tunnel. Compression and integrity is built in, that is part of the SSH product, and it also comes with the base of Unix and Linux, so that's readily available. It's always there on those particular operating systems. What are the cons of using secure FTP? Well, it's probably semi-ubiquitous, and you might ask me why. Well, that's because it's not always readily available on, as I mentioned previously, Unix and Linux, it's available, but not so much on the Windows platforms. You would have to install some sort of SSH client or server on the remote on that Windows server if you, for example, want to send files from the mainframe to a Windows platform. So that's something to bear in mind if you are going to be sending files from the mainframe externally to a Windows platform. SFTP also does not provide EBCDIC to ASCII translation. Some of the SSH offerings available on ZS have extensions to add this type of support. With SSH Detect here, that is certainly available, and I'll talk about some of those features that come with the product. The other nice thing is, with some of the SSH software out there, you don't have that direct access to MVS dataset support. Again, with SSH Detect here, that's available. You can elect or determine where you want the files stored, whether you want it as a ZFS or stored in a ZFS file system or directly in a MVS dataset. The command syntax is different, so if you are considering going down the SFTP route, there may be some re-education required for those folks that are using the SFTP or while planning to roll out the SFTP. And one last thing to remember, that SFTP only protects the data in transit. So once the data arrives on the remote end, bear in mind that there's still a security exposure as far as auditors are concerned, because it could be a little bit of a free-for-all once the data lands on the destination. What would be good reasons to consider using Secure FTP? This may be a great solution if you're interested in disseminating data to your Linux farm, or your partners are already using Linux or Unix. So that could be one place that could be of great help for you. Let's talk about FTP to SFTP conversion, and in this particular case we are going to show you this in our live demo using VFTP and SSH. What are the pros of using this type of methodology, or using this if you want to migrate your FTPs to SFTP? It does satisfy the SFTP requirement. SSH Detect here makes it easier to build the bridge to ease the FTP to SFTP conversion. So this involves an FTP to SFTP proxy, and I'm going to show you this in my live demo when we get to that. Essentially what happens is the FTP commands get routed to this proxy, and there they are converted from FTP command syntax to SFTP commands, allowing you to communicate with your partner's SSH SFTP server natively. The network portion is really SFTP, and one thing to note about this solution is you do not have to make any changes to your FTP batch jobs. So bear in mind, this is for your batch jobs that's outgoing from the mainframe to your different locations, your Windows servers, Linux and Unix servers. The SSH Detect tier product also supports secure communication, and I'll show you that, for example, connecting from my laptop to SSH ZOS SSH on the mainframe using port 22. So you do also have that method of encryption if you want to send files from remote locations into ZOS. What are the cons of using FTP to SFTP conversion? FTP and SFTP are sometimes not always 100% compatible, so be aware there may be some changes required if you want to get everything working correctly. Common uses for considering this solution: if you have a big investment in FTP in place at your site, and a conversion to native SFTP is something that you're looking at, that could be a very major undertaking. But with this solution, it might prove a lot easier for you. You don't have to go about allocating a lot of manpower and resources in order to convert your batch jobs from FTP to SFTP, and we'll be talking about that in more detail. Okay, let's quickly review some of the features. Remember, there's two components here, or two solutions we're discussing today. The vital signs for FTP, which is the monitor. It does a bunch of different things. Firstly, it provides you with that visibility. We always say to customers, how can you monitor what you cannot see? VFTP provides you with that visibility, the eyes into your FTP, so both inbound and outbound. You can quickly identify what is taking place, and you can also see the context of FTP transfers, so including the session log. You can see what commands were used. You can also see the session detail. All of this information is available to you, and it's really simple to use. The product doesn't require a lot of user training, and you can also outsource it to different types of users. So you could say, for example, folks in your maybe your help desk center, give them the ability to be super users, that they can view everybody's FTP transfers and help folks when they have problems, or outsource it to your development team where they only have access to view their FTP transfers. You can drill down and see problem sessions and transfers. You also have the confidence of success but that VFTP provides you. So sometimes if you're using SMF to monitor your FTP transfers, you may get misleading results, but with VFTP, the confidence of success factor is always going to provide you with the correct information. There's so many different queries, and I'm going to show you that in the live demo. You can show secured versus unsecured FTP transfers, and it's also a great way for you to identify when you want to go through this migration process, identify what batch jobs or what folks are doing out there, and maybe identify one or two streams, and you can slowly cut into converting those FTP batch jobs to SFTP. Another component to VFTP is automation. Some of our customers make use of this. FCL is stands for FTP control language, which basically allows you to code statements within your batch job. So you can create rules, and you can say, all right, if this particular FTP transfer fails, or I'm not able to connect to the remote endpoint, wait 5 or 10 minutes and then retry the operation. If that doesn't work, send out an email to everybody on the network team to let them know that there could be a possible problem with this FTP transfer. So that's the type of automation that you can build into your batch jobs, and that's something called FTP control language. You can also, for example, restart failed FTP transfers. Then there's the auditing piece to the product, where we can provide you with complete details. Perhaps you need to go back and see what transpired on an FTP, an FTP session a year or two ago. You can store all of this information inside of the VFTP database, and you can determine how long these FTP transfers should remain inside of the database. There's also some SMF logging, some sample batch reports. We also have a nice utility that allows you to extract information out of the VFTP database. You can import that information in the comma delimiter format, so that'll allow you to import it into something like the Microsoft Excel spreadsheet, and I've seen a lot of customers use this to produce reports for their managers. And lastly, there is also a security piece to the product, where you can enforce control over FTP commands like the powerful site command. You can also prevent job sent to the JS pool. So again, let me reiterate, VFTP does not do the encryption for you. That's the SSH component of the product, which I'm going to discuss in the next few slides. You can also generate an alert warning notifications. So when certain FTPs are running, you can let people know that, hey, there's a really large FTP running, and you can also, if you want to, choose to terminate those FTP transfers. Here's a quick example of FTP command security. In this particular case, the person is trying to do a get of a file that is not authorized to. With our security exits in place, this user ID was not allowed to download the sensitive information contained in this data set. Okay, so that was VFTP. Let's move along. Let's talk about SSH Detect here, which is the other product. So they, like I mentioned, the two components. It is the enterprise class security solution for IBM ZOS mainframes, providing secure file transfers, and that's what we see most of our customers use it for. It also does have the ability to secure any type of TCP traffic, so secure application connectivity, and also secure system administration. One of the things, or a few of the things that set the product apart from the other OpenSSH implementations, is that it does have or supports the transparent FTP to SFTP conversion, and also FTP tunneling. So that's something that you can configure on the proxy, and you can say, what do you want to do? Do you want to, for this particular IP address or for this connection, I want you to convert the commands to FTP to convert them from FTP to SFTP, or you could consider sending across in an FTP tunnel. And I do have a slide or two on showing the differences and when you might consider configuring the proxy differently. The native ZOS dataset support, that's big. For those folks that have OpenSSH, that is a limitation. With the SSH Detect product, native ZOS dataset supports built into the product. You can elect where the information is stored on your ZOS system. Also supports the hardware acceleration of crypto operations. It does support the ASCII to EBCDIC conversion. And if your site is RACF, ACF2, top secret, we don't really care. We support all of those SAF security products. So just two more PowerPoint slides and I get into the live demo. Here's a kind of putting everything together, the two solutions together, SSH Detect and VFTP, the complete solution. And one of the steps required when you install VFTP is to install our VFTP client wrapper, which allows you to provide some of, or perform some of the functions I just spoke about. So the VFTP client wrapper wraps around the standard IBM FTP client, and what happens is we then able to, for example, do some of the automation and also route batch jobs to the proxy. This case here, with our client wrapper in place, and I'm going to show you this on VFTP, you can configure a batch job or batch jobs depending on how you want to go through this migration. And when this batch job runs, the VFTP intercepts it because it knows this batch job is eligible to be routed to the SOX proxy. The proxy then will take those FTP commands and convert it to SFTP. And in this case here, you can see we do have a SSH SFTP server on the remote end. If you are sending the data across to using SFTP, there is no requirement to have an FTP server on the remote end. So there's another scenario which I mentioned previously. This particular case, it's exactly the same. The only thing that's different over here is that I've decided to configure the proxy to, instead of converting the commands from FTP to SFTP, I've said it must send the data across in a secure SSH tunnel. And one such example might be, let's assume you're sending from a mainframe that's running SSH Detect here, and you're sending it to another LPAR where you only have open SSH running on. You could configure this particular connection to send the data across in a secure shell tunnel. You can still go about storing the data directly into a ZOS dataset, so you get those advantages, some of those features that come with SSH Detect here. There is some customization required on the OpenSSH server on the remote end to allow, for example, the TCP forwarding. So obviously in this particular case, you would need an FTP server on the remote end. So that's an example where you might consider configuring the proxy to send the data across in a secure shell tunnel. Okay, so I'm gonna switch to the demo, and what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna switch to VFTP. I've already logged on to VFTP. This is the user interface. I've logged on using my Firefox. That's my preference, but we do support IE as well. On the left hand side, these are the standard queries that the product gets shipped with. So what we find, for the most part, all of the queries on the left hand side suffices or meets most of customers in requirements. However, if you want to get more granular, let's assume you want to write your own queries, you can save them as a favorite. So you could say, all right, show me any batch job or show me any IP addresses that's using the 10.1.0.star network and that meets a filter of FTP star, for example. That's how granular you can get, and that is documented. You can, like I said, save that as a favorite and run those queries at any time. I think I do have a few of them there. You can see some of the favorites that I've saved. Right now I've elected to run the protection mechanism query. That's the one that's being shown on the right hand side, and now it's given me a breakdown of the different traffic types here on the STS LPARs. So I have a number of agents reporting to this VFTP web server, and all of the information is contained in a database. So yeah, for example, you can see there's 442 transfers for the last 3 days that was unsecured. There was some also using SSH and also some using the SSH tunnel, and a few also that was basically converting the FTP commands to SFTP. So pretty simple. It's just point and select whatever you want. So I could go and say, all right, show me for the last 8 hours, and there I can see for the last 8 hours that's the information. I can now click on any one of those numbers and I can break it out and see the exact FTP transfers that occurred over the last 8 hours. As you can see, there's a lot of good information on this. You can use the slider bar to get to other information, or just click on the details tab at the bottom, and now you're going to get information about this one transfer that I've selected on the top. You can also see, just by putting your cursor on that reply code, it'll give you an idea if this FTP transfer works successfully or not. So all good information, some transfer, file, performance, and also session information. and click on the session log, and now I can get the session log because our VFTP client is above the IBM FTP client. I can view exactly what transpired, what this particular user did, and it looks like he did a change working directory, and looks like it did not work. This particular FTP transfer did not work successfully. Another good one that I find that is of interest to customers is the remote IP one. And I was working with a customer recently when they installed VFTP on their system, and in one day they identified almost 1 terabyte worth of FTP transfers that they were not aware of. And here you can see now the remote IP of that transfer. Alright, what are these folks doing? Who is this particular IP address and what is he doing? So I can now click on and I can see there's the user ID and get some more information about this particular transfer. Okay, so that's the visibility piece of the product, but what is more of interest today for today's webinar, let's show you how you can use VFTP to convert those batch jobs from FTP to SFTP. I'm going to click on the configuration tab and click on the client tab, and that'll open up the vital signs or the VFTP client configuration tab for me. Now here in our environment we got a bunch of different rules. You can see there's quite a few of them. It goes all the way down to 15 rules, and all of them, they perform a variety of different functions, but I'm going to select two for today's demo. Here's one. I've called it SFTP to Unix. This is one that I set up to send information from ZOS to a Unix platform on our network. If I get into more detail about this, you can see the job name, and it applies to any job name that begins with BCVR, and the question mark there says that's a filter for any one character. So it could be BCVR1, 2, AB, whatever matches this particular filter. And in addition to that, SF star. So when any job that runs that matches this filter, VFTP is going to route this batch job and send it across to the proxy to be converted to SFTP. There's some other information required. You can also you can decide if you want this to be a global implementation or just on one of your LPARs. I've only got it set to run on the LPAR called STS1, and that's the agent name as well. Some other information that's important is to make sure that you have the FTP dataset highlighted. There's one or two, in fact there's two operands that need to be added to this dataset. I've chosen to use an alternate one. I've chosen to use one called STS1 TCP/IP, and the two operands that's required is the firewall friendly operand and also a SOCKS configuration file where you point the SOCKS configuration information and tell where information about the SOCKS proxy. What's really important here is to make sure that this particular checkbox is highlighted, and that tells that this particular batch job will be routed across to the SOCKS proxy. Let's go and review one more. We're going to run two batch jobs. This is called FTP to SFTP, so I want you to remember that name, FTP SFTP, because I'm going to point that out in the batch job. And this particular one is called SFTP to Unix. Again, the same applies. The batch job name is just different over here, and it is called XFTP job star. So that's going to match any batch job that runs on our system on the LPAR STS1. That's going to be routed to the proxy. So we're all set. I've already committed these rules, so I don't have to do that again. We can click the close button, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch to TSO and I'm going to run these batch jobs. So here's an example. I'm logged on to the STS1 LPAR. Remember, you saw that in the demonstration in the VFTP panel, and I have the SSH product running and also the proxy. So they run as started tasks on this particular system. The SSH D2 product is configured to listen on port 22. That is configurable, so if you want to change it to an alternate port number, that is certainly possible. Alright, so let's run the first batch job, and that matches the qualifier, remember, XFTP job. So let's submit this batch job, and I'm going to switch back to STSF. Let's do a prefix for this, and we'll be able to see the batch job as it runs. And there you can see the batch job is running, and let's go and point out a few important things inside of this batch job. So the first thing you'll notice In fact, let me just go up a few more lines here just to point out some information. Let's go back there and BF. So the first thing you'll notice is there's some new verbiage inside of the batch job because our VFTP client is in play. The job name is XFTP job, so remember that matched the name of the job that you saw earlier, and it's also applying the rule called FTP to SFTP. And this is information that tells you that the batch job was routed from the proxy got involved, and the commands were converted from FTP to SFTP. So there's some information inside of the batch job that is slightly different now. So this is something that if you do go down this route, you'll have to obviously educate some folks to say that this is some new verbiage inside of the bash job. Just to go back to the bash job, as you can see, regular standard FTP, doing a binary and then a put of a file, and I'm calling it xdump text on this, and I believe this is going to a Windows server on my network. So that one was converting the batch jobs, and to go back to it again just to show you, this is converting FTP to SFTP. So the proxy was configured to convert those commands. So let's give you another example. I've got one here called SFTP to Unix, and you'll see the bash job is going to match a filter that I've set up in the VFTP rule, the client rules, and that's called BCVR1SF7. And again, same, I'm sending it to a Unix platform, and in this particular case, that's the dataset name and that's the remote end. What I have done differently over here is I've chosen to configure the proxy to convert the batch job or the commands, or to run it in a SSH tunnel. So let's do a quick prefix and do a DA. Looks like the job might be finished already. Did I do that correctly? Let's go to a DA. It looks like it's finished already, so it's a pretty small batch job. I'm just going to go all the way down there. There you can see my user ID BCVR1 next to it, and if I select it, let's just go to the bottom and point out some of the information again to you. So there's the job name that matched the filter on VFTP. Remember, the rule on this one was different. This was called SFTP to Unix, and now if I go further down, I've chosen to configure the proxy, in this case, to route the batch jobs across a FTP tunnel. The one thing to remember is there would be a FTP server required on the remote end, so that's the reason. This is just purely for illustration purposes, and like I told you, there might be occasion for you to consider sending the data across in an FTP over across an SSH tunnel. One other thing I want to show you before I go back to VFTP is to show you that I am using a FileZilla. I'm sure most of you are aware of it, and I'm going to just connect from FileZilla to that STS1. It's called FTP the Batavia, and that's the IP address. And if I click connect, I'm now just connecting from my laptop to port 22 on the mainframe, and I can use this particular, it's prompting me for my fingerprint, so it looks like I haven't used this connection for a while, or I have reconfigured it recently, and now it's connecting to that server. I can now transfer files from my laptop up to the mainframe. So pretty simple to use. If you do want to consider using SSH Detect here for inbound FTP transfers, as long as the SSH client that you're using on your workstation complies to the SSH RFC, you should have no problems. And there's a bunch of them out there, like PuTTY, for example, I know is one that some folks do use. Okay, let's switch back to VFTP before I wrap up today's presentation, and let's just go back to VFTP. And what I'm going to do now is just show you the same information you saw. Let's go for the last 15 minutes, hit the get button, and now I'll be able to see oh, I got the wrong query going here. Let's go with the protection mechanism query, and for the last 15 minutes there I can see there was one batch job run using was using FTP to SFTP, and if I just click on the session log, you'll be able to see the exact same verbiage you saw in the batch job when I went into STSF, and there you can see the information there. So really simple to use, as I told you, just a matter of pointing and clicking, and that's really how simple it is. If you got that undertaking, you need to convert your batch jobs from FTP to SFTP, and you don't have the manpower or the resources to go through that. This is something for you to consider. You could certainly use our product to help you with that migration. And here's the other one, just to give an example. This is the one that used the tunnel. Sorry, the other one was converting the commands to SFTP. And again, there you can see the same thing, the rule and also the batch job name. And all of that information is also contained on the right hand side here. If you just drag it to the right, you'll be able to see what the file name was, the conference of success, the job name, the IP address. There's a bunch of information, good information, and you can also drag and rearrange information as you want. But suffice to say that everything that you need is going to be contained either in your details, the session log, or you can just use the screen above here to get to the information that you want. I'm going to run one last query just to give an example. I can say, right, show me all unsecured transfers for the last 15 minutes. Doesn't look like there's much. Let's go for a longer period of time. Let's get for the last 7 days. And this would be a nice way for me to start identifying those batch jobs that if I want to go through this migration process, this could be batch jobs that I want to now identify and start migrating to the proxy. There's also other queries. You can see the 10 largest and also the 10 longest FTPs on the network. So as you can see, it's fairly straightforward. I'm gonna hand the presentation back to Ivan, I believe, and we may be fielding some questions from the audience. So thanks everyone for your time, and we look forward to hearing from you from some of those questions that you may have. Ivan, over to you.